Star Wars is getting sued, this time by Karyn McCarthy, former executive producer from the upcoming series The Acolyte. Well, no surprise, Kathleen Kennedy is at it again with her string of mismanagement. God, I don't ask for much, but I'm going to ask you for this. Please let this case go to discovery. Please, please, please let this case go to discovery. Renegade Online. Well, folks, welcome back. It's another great day here at Valliant Renegade. It's great to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video that are not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that notification bell. Hit that like button. Share this sucker out on the social medias. And, of course, please do leave a comment on this video before you head out the door today. This is a wild one, folks. I did not expect coming into this week. I had a lineup for videos this week that have all gotten tossed out the window. The news cycle in the last 48 hours or so has been absolutely bonkers. We started with a video yesterday, as you're watching this, regarding the confirmation finally from Disney Lucasfilm that the Kevin Feige and the Patty Jenkins movie are officially gone. They have been absolutely canceled. Kevin Feige out as a Star Wars director-producer. Patty Jenkins' film, not happening. It's also gone. By the way, Rian Johnson, for all of you that think that's still happening, I feel bad for you. The only thing in that article that wasn't confirmed was that Taika Waititi's film is also going to be gone. They seem to suggest it was still happening, but I'm going to go ahead and make a prediction right now. That, too, is also gone, especially after his failures at Marvel, even to the point where he drove away Chris Hemsworth as Thor, who said that he really didn't want to do that kind of movie anymore. That's a problem for the Walt Disney Company, and the problems continue. We've chronicled here on Valliant Renegade since almost the dawn of time since we've been on YouTube. That would be, dawn of time would be January 2021. That's the dawn of time for me. But we've been talking about the financial mismanagement of Lucasfilm by one Kathleen Kennedy. And that's not just YouTube pablum. That's actual fact. We've chronicled the financial, the legal details, everything she's done wrong since she's been there. 4 of the films that she has managed, apart from The Force Awakens, which was basically overseen by Robert Iger, 4 of those films that she's done, 3 of them have been absolute boondoggles in terms of management, boondoggles in terms of financial and production budget overruns. It's cost Disney billions of dollars in not only overrun costs, but billions more in lost revenue. This is a woman who is now famous in Hollywood, whether they care to admit it or not, of being an absolute dumpster fire when it comes to running a studio. And I think that's going to hearken her retirement here in the not-too-distant future. Woman's 70 years old this year. And quite frankly, since George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and Richard Donner, and let's face it, even her own husband, Frank Marshall, has let her run amok out there since she took over Lucasfilm in 2012 after the sale to Disney for $4 billion. They're probably all kind of chuckling at this point. But now we have a new issue to deal with, and for that I have a great guest here with me today to discuss it. And that new issue is a lawsuit recently filed just today in Los Angeles court in the state of California by one Karyn McCarthy, a former executive producer on this long talked about show for Disney Plus called The Acolyte, headed by showrunner Leslie Headland, formerly of, well, you know who fame. That guy out there in Hollywood, right? Harvey Weinstein, y'all remember him? Yeah. Leslie Headland, his secretary. Well, she's running that new show for Star Wars that's supposedly still coming up. Well, Disney's now having legal problems over this. Not surprising considering Kennedy's mismanagement. So we have a lawsuit to discuss today, and for that, we're bringing in one of this channel's most illustrious, most famous, and most beloved guests. Welcome aboard once again, Andrew Esquire from The Legal Mindset.
Glad to be here, and glad to be here, everybody. Once again, Karens and lawsuits. These are my specialties, so I'm glad you brought me in for my specialty area of practice. I love chaos in the House of Mouse, Valliant, so I appreciate you inviting me on to talk about this.
Absolutely, and I appreciate our regular channel members sticking around through that 3 to 4 minute intro, because I want to remind folks we have been growing so much here thanks to the viewers out there that have been so magnanimously generous with this channel, sharing this out, and our guests like you, Andrew, that have been coming on here now for over a year or close to a year at this point since we started the Reedy Creek discussions. And, we just crossed 19,000 subs tonight.
Awesome. Congrats.
So we're getting there. So we always kind of want to do a recap for the tons of new viewers that we're getting in here every single day. We need to bring them up to speed. But so recently, I guess just today, let's be honest, this article came out. Let's just get this up on the screen so we can go through this. Lucasfilm has been sued for, quote, egregious axing of producer Karyn McCarthy from Star Wars series The Acolyte. And if you go through the article, it goes into some of the highlights. On the same day it became public, this was the last video that we did for the viewers that saw this yesterday, as you're watching this now. On the same day it became public that Star Wars projects from Kevin Feige and Patty Jenkins have now been, they say are now dormant. They have been canceled. They have been straight up jettisoned out into the ether. If you want to know why, we've been talking about it for well over a year. I'll leave a link to the previous video here. But now they've been hit with a breach of contract lawsuit over the upcoming Acolyte. And this has been another show that has been very heavily debated and in contention since it was announced. It was kind of a sneak attack announcement by Kathleen Kennedy at one of the Disney Plus events involving Leslie Headland. And so everybody is very familiar with this at this point. Just to throw this out there, this is a series that is supposed to be based upon an incredibly failed new Star Wars genre called The High Republic.
How high do you have to be to enjoy The High Republic?
Incredibly. You have to be so high. You have to be so high for The High Republic, Andrew, that you have to believe that a rock called Geode is an actual functional character in this era of
and a Jedi, right?
Star Wars. Yeah, and a Jedi. Right. I mean, it is a joke. This is by far and away, it's the worst selling a series of Star Wars books that has ever been.
But at least they got the Rock's gender identity right. I mean, and that's what we really go to for the big bucks, is making sure that we classify the Rock correctly.
That's right. Trans rocks. Yes. Trans rock lives matter.
Yes.
So anyway, this is where we are. I had to laugh at this today because this is just yet another example of just absolute mismanagement, negligence. It's unbelievable to me at this point with Kathleen Kennedy. It's just one thing after another. So let's get to what the details are. And that is that at this point, Karyn McCarthy has taken the Kathleen Kennedy-run Disney division to court over being pink-slipped from the Leslie Headland-created series last year after just a few weeks of work. And what makes this action all the more bitter and telling of the streamer competition for top talent is that UTA, that's one of the biggest talent agencies in Hollywood by far, they rep Miss McCarthy, and she was being actively courted by Apple TV at the same time to help run their eventual Colin Farrell starring PI, Private Investigator series Sugar, according to the March 7th filing. By the way, that series is now, they're starting to promote it. I've already seen stuff on this series. Apple TV has been making major plays in the streaming market I've been chronicling here on my channel for now over a year. Apple is the big 800-pound gorilla in the room.
Right.
And Karyn McCarthy, she walked away from a major multi-million-dollar, multi-year, multi-season deal with Apple TV to go work with Disney and Kathleen Kennedy on this Acolyte show because she thought they told her this was going to be a better thing for her. They were going to pay her more money and then promptly shanked her after she turned around and refused this Apple contract to go work over at Disney.
That's a massive, massive lost opportunity there. And certainly that's going to be a material fact in the lawsuit. So yeah, we're looking at the actual lawsuit. And you know, from a lawyer's eye, there's a couple things that pop out. First of all, right away, you see glass or veil. That's the lawsuit. That's her lawsuit. On that, they represent her. They represent Catherine. But frankly, they likely have a long working relationship with UTA, United Talent Artists. So they probably have a representation with her agency at large here. But they are representing her as an individual as well. You can see that up there in the verses. Now, it does say it is watermarked unfiled and deadline, but this has been filed. So this was clearly something put out there by Catherine's law firm. They want people to see the complaint.
This is a PR warfare at this point. Yeah.
Complaints have become PR warfare big time. And when we look at a complaint, we do need to realize this is coming from one side. This is obviously construing everything in the light most favorable to the plaintiff. So to be fair, and well, you know, I treat the mouse just as fairly as I treat anybody else, you know, and Lucasfilm and whatever else, this is their side of the story, right? This is Catherine's side of the story. So Lucasfilm will have a response, and they may frame things in a different way, and they may provide different evidence. However, we got to go off what we see in the complaint for now. And the important thing is right up top, you notice what the complaint is for. And there are actually 4 counts here in this complaint. And this is important because even if one fails, you can come for the other 3. They're not something where one needs to work for the other 2 to work. No, they can succeed on one of them, and that's enough. The first one is breach of contract. And for breach of contract to agree, you have to meet all the elements for a contract. In most cases, that's an offer, an acceptance, consideration. It needs to be legitimate. You need to have understood the contract, understood the terms. But contracts can be both oral and written. And in this case, by the way, emails are writing. And people have to understand acceptance of a contract does not mean signing. Let me say that again. You can accept a contract without signing an actual piece of paper. How does that work, Andrew? What do you mean I can accept the contract? Well, if I send Valliant Renegade an invite to a stream and I say, if you come on this stream, I will pay you $1,000. I've never sent him this contract, by the way.
Wait. You all heard that just now.
Yeah. But if I said, if you come on the stream, he doesn't need to write me back and say, okay. He just needs to show up. If he shows up and I've emailed him that, I've sent him that message, that's enough. And what we may have in this case, because if you look at the exhibits, all of the contracts are unsigned, all the pieces of paper are unsigned. You may have acceptance of a contract through performance, through action, rather than through writing. So that's number 1. But even if they said, you know what, the court doesn't believe there's a contract, well, guess what? There's 3 more. Breach of covenant of good faith and fair dealing. In contract negotiations, you have to negotiate in good faith and in fair dealing, meaning if I say, hey, I have a job for you, and you know that you're going to terminate that job in a week, that's not good faith. That's literally the opposite.
It's basically
and still, let me ask you this: do you think they just made that decision the day of in that week, or do you think that's something they were mulling over for months?
This was part of my issue with this. This was so fast and so ridiculous. I mean, again, Karyn McCarthy at this point was a hot property in Hollywood. I mean, I've gone back and I've looked at the research, the shows, the property she was involved in at that point as a female EP, executive producer, affiliated with the PGA, the Producers Guild. I mean,
we're Women's History Month, you know, strong women, you know.
She was a hot property. This is somebody that everybody out there was after. This is why Apple TV was going after, giving her a big offer. Disney apparently was going after her with a big offer. I honestly had to ask myself, and again, folks out there, you're watching in Hollywood, and people involved with this case, this is my speculation. This is a humble observation from a simple YouTuber. This kind of looked like sabotage. Like they brought her in knowing that they were going to try to grab her for an exclusive contract. And if you read through this lawsuit, within less than a week after she refused the offer from Apple, Disney, Lucasfilm, and Blue Stocking, by the way, folks, Blue Stockings is the production company that was formed by Lucasfilm to produce the Acolyte, which is common property in Hollywood, California, where a studio like a Lucasfilm or a Marvel or somebody else will make a separate LLC whose sole purpose is to produce a singular project, whether it be a theatrical enterprise or a streaming service enterprise or something for TV. That's normal. But it seems like as soon as she declined that Apple contract, that Disney decided, okay, we renege. That's it. We're out. We're done. We don't need you anymore. The show went on, and the show is in principal photography, folks, right now. It has been in principal photography since November of 22. It is set to wrap principal photography in May of 23, 2 months from now. So this show is on, and according to this lawsuit, this is a show that had a large budget. This is a show that had multiple seasons attached to it under Karyn McCarthy's contract, according to the allegations in this suit.
And likely the pitch that she was given, right?
Exactly. And then they would just like 2 weeks later, now we're good.
And that right there goes to number three. Number three there, promissory estoppel. Promissory estoppel under the law is essentially as simple as, I made you a promise. I told you this would be multiple episodes. This would be multiple seasons. This would be great. And you relied on that. Doesn't need to be a contract at all. Just, I made a promise, right? You relied on that. You got your hopes up. I gassed you up. I told you this and that. We're going to pay you. It's going to be multi-million-dollar. It's going to be great. It's going to be amazing. And then you backed out of your end of the deal. And that is the key of promissory estoppel. I think even if the contract stuff falls through, which I don't think it will actually, but even if it did, promissory estoppel would hit there. And the last is more of a California labor code thing. And I'm not a fan of regulations, but there is a California law for failure to pay wages. So there's an argument that her wages attached and they didn't pay her wages that she was due. So all four of those are possible violations. Once again, any one of those things can be enough. It could just be found under 4 and she would recover. Now, what would she recover? I think if we look at Exhibit A here, which is the Candace Campos email from Lucasfilm to David Morris, that gives us very broad strokes of the deal. So what happened is,
down to that,
and this is true for any negotiation, is these people, these individuals, artists, are not negotiating themselves. They're negotiating through their agents, right? Mm-hmm. That's why they're there. And agents know what standards are, what the pay is, what the expectation should be, and everything else. You know, talent doesn't know what to think of. They pay somebody to do that. Yep. So the agent is coming up with the terms. So saying, okay, here's the terms. You know, Mr. Agent, here's my terms. Here's what we got. And here you see what happened. Now, I wish we did not have redactions here. I know about specifically about the amount.
We have a lot of the per diems and some of the spiffs in there. So to me, it's like, okay, I know we've got some redactions.
There's a lot. Something K, right? So I'm thinking it's like, you know, 10K, 20K, 50K, 100K, 200K per week. I think there's a K in there. I don't think this is just a 4-digit number. It's not $1,000 a week or $2,000.
Look at 2,500 British pounds sterling per week living allowance. That was the living allowance. That's not her salary. That's the living allowance. So
per week.
Yeah. So we're talking about a contract here that was likely worth millions in the aggregate, millions of compensation, and just punched out. And I mean, the lawsuit even stipulates here that she showed up ready to go to work because Disney was, if you go through the specific language, we're not going to go through all that today, but it's very detailed that They needed her to get going immediately. And that was kind of the thing. It's like they were putting the pressure on her. Make a decision. We need you to go now. So she made a decision. She showed up immediately and started getting to work.
Hold on. This is the important thing. Material right here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look at this. Sent Friday, April 8th. Start date, Monday, April 11th.
Yes.
Do you guys see this? Are you kidding? This is Friday to Monday. Most people aren't even in the office over the weekend. They're literally saying, pick up everything over the weekend, get on a plane and come to London. This is insane.
Exactly.
This is actually insane.
Fly from California to London. Be here in 72 hours to start working. Fly from California to London. We're talking about halfway across the globe.
So hold on. So you're writing off Sunday because that's a travel day. You've got less than 24 hours to make the call on this.
This is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have no reason to believe this timeline doesn't check out because she went and did the thing. She got on the plane and got there, and that was the acceptance. The second she got on that plane to go out there and head over to the UK, that was all she needed to do. She's accepted these terms of the deal, whether or not these were inked into a final contract or not. And let's just go through these terms here. So 8-week guarantee.
Yep.
So my interpretation of that would be that they guarantee at least 8 weeks of work. So at a bare minimum, I think you could take this weekly amount, multiply it by 8, and I think that's the minimum that Lucasfilm could be on the line here, the bare minimum. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you see a living allowance. So if there's any damages in terms of the amount that she spent for that or already went in the tank, that's good. That would be tacked on. Or a first-class house and a first-class hotel, and a per diem of 110 pounds a day. This is very healthy. First-class hotel and 150 per day at a foreign location, such as the Canary Islands. And I believe this is 150 US. So it's probably equal to 112 pounds at that exchange rate at the time, because obviously the pound is taking a pounding, if you will. $10,000 in tax advice. That is generous. And then a car and driver, a UK cell phone, and a computer rental. So if you add up what those would be and the cost of those, and how much those would have saved her, those are actually non-trivial amounts. She's got certainly 6 figures in damages at the least, if not 7 here, depending on that first line of that contract. So I'm looking at 6-7 figures here minimum when I'm looking at these broad stroke terms.
Yeah, and I mean, this is kind of one of those things. And obviously, it was meant to go much longer than this, because I want to remind folks, Apple TV was throwing millions at this woman to do a multi-season big show contract over there, a show with Colin Farrell that is now being promoted and touted at this point. I mean, Apple is getting ready. They're starting to promote the release of this. Acolyte has been fumbling around at this point for years. She walked away from that deal to do this. So any reasonable person could look at this without, in my opinion, any legal knowledge and go, well, if she was walking away from a multi-million-dollar Apple contract for a multi-season show, then surely she wasn't so stupid that she was walking over here expecting only 2 months worth of guarantees from Disney to do a show that may or may not happen. No, there was meat and potatoes on the table here for this. And she obviously got shanked. The question at this point is why? And that's what we don't know yet. And that's why I pray to God this case actually gets to discovery. But like you, Andrew,
what you think there's something? You think there's something Valliant in those emails, right? In those Lucasfilm emails, you think there might be something in that language on why she was axed, or something they might not want to come to light, and they might want to keep buried in those internal emails?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, look, Disney has been an utter train wreck of management, and not just at Lucasfilm. It's been going across the board. I think I would love to see this case get to discovery. But I suspect that at this point, Disney would be willing to do almost anything to not get to that point because of what it would divulge about how just completely screwed up Lucasfilm is right now. I think Disney wants to keep things quiet. I think Disney knows they have a problem with Lucasfilm. I believe the rumors that at this point that because it makes a lot of sense, Kathleen Kennedy is probably going to be graciously exited following Indiana Jones 5. That's been her baby. I mean, I know she got renewed in 2021. The woman is now going to be 70 years old this year when this movie comes out. I mean, it's just time. And the Hollywood trades have really in the last couple of years just been laying one punch after another on Star Wars, on Lucasfilm, on its mismanagement. I don't know how much more that this studio can take at this point. I mean, the writing has been on the wall. That doesn't mean, to be clear to everybody watching, that I think that Star Wars is going to get fixed overnight.
Right.
I just, this is, again, I've always been a purely business numbers guy. And Kathleen Kennedy is a tumultuous disaster for the
and
Walt
what
Disney
you can't court is you can't court chaos, because chaos leads to within your organization it leads to lawsuits like this. It leads to issues where you're having employees suing, where you're having breached contracts, and these things set back an organization a huge amount. They distract you from your mission of producing good content. If you're just besieged by lawsuits, you're not able to actually get work done. I can say this having been in-house counsel, having worked in corporations. We're distracted when we have all these lawsuits and we're having to answer discovery complaints. That's not what we want to be doing. We're focused on building the business, building a brand, building products, developing them, developing new policies for things internally. We can't do that when we're constantly under siege from external lawsuits. But it's a result of bad behavior in this case. Now, sometimes there are meritless lawsuits. Sometimes there are lawsuits that are just completely frivolous. That's fine. But you're always going to get the frivolous lawsuits. You're going to have kind of a resting level of frivolous lawsuits. But when you start inviting in chaos, bringing in bad leadership, right, having no direction, you're going to see that uptick, right? That's going to tick up from your normal level of, okay, there's some BS lawsuits every once in a while, right? That's not what's happening here with Lucasfilm. And this is definitely a diagnosis that there are problems under the hood.
And I want to ask you something about real quick, because I got some final thoughts here on this, because something about this has been bugging me. Again, this is a show that is now in principal photography.
Yes.
So why would you hire somebody and then subsequently fire them at this level, at an executive producer level, under what is ostensibly, by all accounts, a multi-million-dollar contract? That is so big and so egregious a violation of such contract that now UTA, her legal firm that represents her agency, her talent agency in Hollywood, California,
right,
is, I would think, now paying for this lawsuit is part of representation of her. But I see this, I want to ask you, because people have brought this up, I have brought this up, and I want to get your clarification of whatever this means. And in here on page 3 of the complaint.
Sure.
Okay, the true names and capacities of defendants does 1 through 10, sections 1 through 10 of the lawsuit.
Does 1 through 10, yeah.
Yeah. Whether individual, corporate, or otherwise, are unknown to plaintiffs at this time. And plaintiffs therefore sue these defendants by such fictitious names. When the true names and capacities of the facetiously named defendants are ascertained, plaintiffs will amend the demand to reflect their true names. Now, my question, Andrew, is this kind of like boilerplate legal language? Or is this something to where it's like, we're actually still hunting for defendants that we don't necessarily have the capacity to name yet? We think there might be more people. What's the deal here?
So, yeah, I'll give you the answer, and the answer is yes. The language is actually boilerplate. This is actually fairly standard when you don't know who they are, but you know they do exist. And this happens, for example, let's say you're suing a corporation and there's lots of subsidiaries, but you don't necessarily know the particular subsidiaries. You just know, hey, there's some subsidiaries involved here. I just got to figure out which are the right ones. You say, hey, look, we're naming this corporation and perhaps other people, or maybe agents of that corporation, contractors, whatever else, employees. There's somebody else to add to this. We know they exist, but we don't know who they are. So that language is thrown in there. It's not uncommon. This is actually fairly common, where in the beginning you won't know them, and what you will file is what's called an amended complaint. So a complaint gets you through the door. It's the first thing that starts the process rolling. But as you get discovery, mind you, discovery is, discovering facts about the case. When you get back discovery, basic information, basic corporate data from them, you're going to be able to fill in those blanks and say, okay, now we're naming this person, this person, this person, this person. But we're reserving that right because we know it's not just going to be them in the end. This is enough to get it through the door. This is enough to survive any initial challenge in terms of the parties. But it's something that leads us to pay attention to the case, because we may have some names added which pique our interest and which have us saying, really, this person was involved, right? You don't know who can be those extra people. They could be individuals, they could be corporate, they could be anybody. So you don't know exactly who's going to be involved. You just know this is going to expand, and this is going to probe deeper into Lucasfilm, unless they come to a settlement immediately.
And that's just it. I think that's what they will do, because to me, the unknown parties, the unknown names, again, the only two actual named defendants in this case are corporate entities. Lucasfilm Limited, or as we colloquially call it, LFL, and then this specific entity that was built by Lucasfilm to produce the Acolyte. Let me ask you this: if it would be discovered, if we got to that point, that, say, Kathleen Kennedy herself is the one that decided to renege on this contract and gave the go-ahead to just terminate this thing, this is not happening. I presume then, based on that language in that section of the claimant, or in that section of the claim, would be then amended to include her name to say, well, okay, she was the trigger man on this, right? So she would be named in the suit. Is that how that would work?
Yeah, I mean, she could be named in the suit as the person who, like I said, is maybe individually responsible. Now, It may ultimately end up being, hey, look, this all comes back on Lucasfilm, but we're naming this person because they're significant, even though the liability will still fall on Lucasfilm, LFL, right? Will fall on them specifically, but we're going to name them because they're significant, or they were the significant decision maker here. If, for example, Kathleen Kennedy was a significant decision maker, she could very much be individually named, even if that liability, because it's within the scope of her employment, would fall on LFL. And ultimately, by the way, that's where it's going to fall, because I guarantee you that Kathleen Kennedy has indemnifications for this sort of thing.
Sure.
So I'm under no auspices that this is going to fall under Kathleen Kennedy's personal responsibility.
No.
This is going to fall under the corporate responsibility. And by the way, this is what happens when you bring in bad leadership. They are not going to suffer individually. They're going to be walking away with a golden parachute at best, right? At the very best. And we've said this about Kathleen Kennedy when her contract has come up. And I think I've been on your channel to opine about employment contracts and whatnot in the end. Kathleen Kennedy will never, even if she's fired or whatever, she will never suffer. She will always be taking a golden parachute on the way out. She will always be doing just fine. There will be no, revenge against Kathleen. That will never be a thing, and people should not wait for that or hope for that in terms of monetary, losses on the form of Kathleen Kennedy. The real loss is Lucasfilm, and the real tragedy has always been the production of good content. Because all of this, these legal troubles, are sapping resources from the production of good story.
Amen. Absolutely. And I agree with that entire take 100%. And we've been consistent on that here on our channel at Valliant Renegade, that, we were, frankly, I think I was the first person to just come out and blatantly say on YouTube, look, Kathleen Kennedy is never going to be fired. She's never going to be frog marched out of the Walt Disney Company. She's never going to be humiliated. Whenever she leaves, it's always going to be a grandiose ceremony of praise and lauding of her career and all kind of stuff. I've been very consistent on that for the 2 years or so I've been on YouTube. Now, I thought,
and by the way, don't even be surprised if it ends up in a situation where she gets all these lauding, praises, whatever. She walks out, somebody else comes in, catches massive blame, and is the scapegoat for failures, and then maybe
like Bob
Kathleen
Chapek.
Kennedy. Yeah, I was
saw
gonna
that.
say, and then we
We
have
just
an
saw that
Iger
recently.
repeat. Kathleen Kennedy comes back for something else to save them. All of a sudden, Kathleen Kennedy's back to save the franchise, right?
We've been
Don't be
joking
surprised.
here that Kathleen Kennedy is probably, I mean, what she would really love is the Bob Iger deal, which I don't know if you've seen the coverage that we did on this with SEC filings by the Walt Disney Company themselves, basically admitted to the fact that Bob Iger had a 5-year consultant contract after he retired as CEO, which is why he never left his own office in Burbank in the Disney C-suite. Chapek couldn't take the CEO's office because Iger refused to vacate it because Iger still had a contract with Disney to basically sit there and sabotage his successor.
Mm-hmm.
And now Chapek is gone.
Yeah.
That's the deal Kennedy wants, folks. She's probably not getting that deal.
No. I don't think she'll get that deal either. But certainly, but like you said, certainly she's not getting Frog March. She's going to be just fine. But we'll cover it either way. I know that you and I will be covering that either on my channel, Legal Mindset, or on your channel, Valliant Renegade, because I'm sure there will be some issues, both legal and non-legal, involving that transition. Yeah,
and look, there's been some speculation on whether the Acolyte will actually come to fruition or not. And it's something that, my friend and I, Cameron Pasha, have had conversations on. And Cameron has been of the mindset that Acolyte is never really going to happen, at least to what it was originally intended, or be canceled entirely. I've been in the mindset that it's probably still going to happen, but it's going to be radically altered from what it was originally intended to be, which I'll remind folks, the original intention of this show that is the subject of this lawsuit was this show was meant to be the Star Wars vehicle for Brie Larson.
Oh, no, not Miss Larson.
Yes. Oh, yes.
No. Oh,
no. This show was announced and created hot off the Captain Marvel fame in 2019. And this was supposed to be the show that would bring Brie Larson from Marvel as a Jedi, the most powerful Jedi ever, into the Star Wars universe. That was all the rumors at the time when the show started. It was all around Brie Larson in the show. She gone. She's not part of the show anymore. So it has already radically changed. But the thing is, this lawsuit does seem to lend, at least at this point, some degree of credence to the fact that maybe they hired this person, or somebody hired this person, this Karyn McCarthy, and then said, look, you promised all this. This show's not actually going to go that far. This show's not actually going to do all that. So can you just go ahead and just throw that contract in the trash where Disney would do this all the time? We screw people sideways with telephone poles. This is just another day that ends in Y. Let's do it again. That's possible too.
It's very possible, but here's the thing. I mean, any success of this show now, regardless, this claim can go through whether or not this ever launches or sees the light of day. Yep. Even if this thing is in the vault, it never is launched. The photography is burnt. Everything else, this claim can still go through. This can still go through. It's not dependent on that. However, I will say,
I think that was Disney's hubris to think they could get away with this.
It looks worse if it ends up being having any modicum of success, even a small amount of success, because then they can say, hey, but for this, I would have made X, right? But for their behavior, right? But regardless, this claim can go through either way, even if it tanks and burns and goes nowhere. In fact, to a certain degree, that may be the motive, right? We may discover that as the motive, and if that was the motive, that hey, some people in marketing or whatever were pitching this as successful, but the reality, the numbers guys said, guys, this is gonna kind of suck, and it's not gonna make us any money. That'll be amazing discovery, and I look forward to reading that and seeing that if and when it comes out.
Like I said, I want this to go to Discovery so bad, but I'm fully realizing the fact that Disney will probably do anything at this point to settle it. UTA and their lawyers are involved in this. This is not a little thing of some nobody suing Disney. This is a major Hollywood talent agency that's involved in this at this point. A talent agency that represents a lot of talent that works with Disney. I mean, this is a problem for them. So
Yes.
it's going to be fascinating to watch the filings on this come forward. I want this to go to Discovery so bad. Please, I don't ask you for much, God, but I want Discovery on this. You know,
I really want it as well, but I am realistic about what the outcome of these things are, which is typically settling. And so I'm going to be realistic with you guys.
Indeed, indeed. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for being here tonight, and make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. Go check out The Legal Mindset on the YouTubes, and make sure you follow Andrew on Twitter as well. We'll leave links in the video description below. Thank you so much for being here. Click that like and subscribe. Check out the second channel. It is going like wildfire over at Renegade Online. And until next time, we'll see you. At least until Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for our live show right here. Take care.